So, the CW orders a full season of 22 episodes for Batwoman, with a Rotten Tomatoes audience score of 12%, an IMDb score of 3.1 out of 10, a Metacritic audience score of 1.5%, and me able to effortlessly highlight the writing flaws of this series so far. Why is this show getting a full season order? I think someone in Hollywood is getting blackmailed. Hello, I am the Script Doctor. Batwoman is back to bore you again by taking 41 minutes to tell you 10 minutes of story. Titled, Who Are You?, this episode introduces Magpie as the Thief of the Week and attempts to expand on Kate's character within the show. We open up with a cat burglary style theft from Magpie. She's caught by night security and pulls off an escape with some little birdie explosives before zipping up to the skylight. Vesper Fairchild supplements narration about how Magpie has been stealing jewelry for a week. This cuts us over to Kate, who is in bed with Regan, where she speculates that Batman and Batwoman are doing the deed. Kate jokes about such a rumor being started by Killer Croc, which means that he may be showing up in the series at some point. Regan pontificates that Gotham could use a woman's touch, but is Gotham really all that bad? After 3 complete episodes, has anyone actually seen how bad Gotham has become? Aside from the main floor of Wayne Enterprises and that one orphanage, all the buildings and streets appear to be nice. There were a few tents out last episode, but it's nowhere near as bad as San Francisco, so frankly, I'm not seeing Gotham as a city in peril. It appears to be pretty stable and in no need of a hero. To the writers of this show, you have 9 additional episodes left to write and film. Please use at least one of them to depict how truly bad Gotham is so as to justify Batwoman's need. Right now, the most you've had her do is personal to the Kane family and not to the city. When it does come to the city, all Batwoman has done is stand atop a clock tower under a helicopter spotlight. Give us more, something that universally translates this character into a hero. Instead, we get making out under the covers that's interrupted by a phone text. The making out must not have been all that great to be so easily distracted. Not only is it a text, but it's one from Luke that uses a bat emoji. Real good at keeping a secret, Luke. Phone texts are permanently recorded by service providers and can be accessed with or without court orders by the authorities. They can be used to track down Kate's secret identity, thus stopping her entirely from being Batwoman. But I guess this is a prequel now to how Ruby Rose ended up in Orange is the New Black. Kate doesn't know how to explain to Regan who Luke is, and instead lies about how they share an office space and that a water main broke. So Kate's a plumber now? Kate arrives at Wayne Enterprises, where the head of Museum Antiquities is overseeing a photo shoot of Martha Wayne's pearls that she wore the night she was murdered. Roxana, the head of this event, thinks having the necklace on display is the best representation of strong women and pillars of their community. Also, those pearls are not Kate's to lend out. Kate doesn't own the building she's standing in. She's using Bruce's private property for her own personal gain. That is ethically horrible. Do the writers not understand how a hero is supposed to behave? On top of that, what do you want to bet that we learn nothing about what Martha did while she was alive to be considered a strong and notable woman? From the comic books, there is not really a whole lot of information about Thomas and Martha Wayne. Thomas was a doctor, Martha was a socialite party girl. If memory serves, her father owned a chemical company and she may have dated a mobster before marrying Thomas. I think she did charity work while married to Thomas, but that's about it. Not a whole lot there. That lack of development is probably why we can see her and her husband get murdered in every iteration of Batman and not really care. Luke questions as to where Kate was. I don't know why. He doesn't work for her and she's not his responsibility. Turns out the whole necklace thing that we're seeing right now is not the reason why Luke texted. Nope, he's worried about Dodson, who's dying somewhere in the Batcave. He can't be too worried as he's spending his morning with photographers and a museum coordinator, but when we get to the Batcave there's an alarm buzzing out and Luke is now acting with urgency and panic because Dodson is going to die. Kate wants him kept in the cave until he reveals Alice's grand plan. Which is funny because we are all smart enough to know that Alice has no grand plan. So this is just torture, plain and simple. Why does Alice not have a grand plan? Because she hasn't done anything to establish a grand plan. The most grand plan she had was holding that movie in the park hostage, except no one in the park knew that was happening and Batwoman foiled it rather easily. What did she do after that? She killed 2 old people, got caught, blown up, and broke into Daddy Crow's home to play the cello and make a phone call. Yeah, that's some master plan Alice really has brewing there. Oh, Alice tells Kate she's got a plan, means nothing to tell us something that isn't happening. It means more to show us something that's about to happen. Tell me all you want, but if you cannot show me, I cannot believe you. On the other side of town, Catherine, the stepmom, is digging up Beth's grave for some reason. We finally get a confirmation on the age of Beth and Kate, which is 29, and we learn that the girls were 13 when the accident occurred. So Kate is 29, yet acts like a 19-year-old. Now, don't get me wrong, it is perfectly fine to act young at heart, but that doesn't mean you get to ignore responsibility or responsible behavior. Many writers think that a lack of responsibility keeps characters young, but it is not the case. A youthful approach to life keeps characters young, and how they take on responsibility and deal with conflict makes them strong. A character can refuse the call to adventure, but it doesn't mean that they are refusing responsibility. There could be responsibilities at home that take priority, but when the call compels the character to act, that is when the responsibilities of the adventure outweigh the responsibilities at home. Meaning there won't be a home to go back to if the hero doesn't take on the adventure. Anyway, so the stepmom is digging up Beth's grave, except she's not allowed to do that. Catherine is not a blood relative of Beth. Only Daddy Crow or Kate could give permission, and even then, if Daddy Crow and Kate don't agree, nothing is going to happen. So stepmom is probably paying a lot of money to keep the cemetery out of this act, which, if discovered, will see those running the cemetery going to prison and a whole slew of other problems. Not only that, they're doing this during the day. Now the cemetery can't even argue plausible deniability. Also, we are not getting any information as to why stepmom is doing this. Is she trying to dig up what is buried in the grave in the event that Daddy Crow decides to do it himself? Wouldn't he already know what's in the grave? I mean, he said they didn't find a body, so it's just an empty coffin inside. Did Catherine put in the bone fragments her investigators found all those years ago? Wouldn't matter 15 years later because bone fragments don't last that long. In many cases, the bones we do find over our history were preserved by accident through nature. If you throw a set of bone fragments in a coffin, they're going to degrade away to dust within 12 years, and I seriously doubt the funeral home is going to embalm tiny skull fragments. The stepmom is wasting time and money on this act. Catherine is ambushed by Alice, who threatens to reveal this conspiracy to Daddy Crow unless Catherine gives Alice a very powerful toy that her company has developed. Wait, Catherine's company developed? Didn't Daddy Crow say that she had investigators help searching for Beth? Wouldn't that put her in a law enforcement career? But now, 15 years later, she owns one of the largest defense companies in the country? That's a hell of a career change in such a short time. Or did Catherine hire investigators? We seem to have a conflict in character background here. More than likely, the writers of this script weren't paying attention to the showrunner about who Catherine is or what she does. Wasn't she talking about selling product to Dubai during episode 2? Should a US weapons manufacturer really be selling their product to other governments? Is that not treason? I suppose if the foreign government is an ally, and they're selling obsolete product, and they get government authorization, but still that all sounds extremely sketchy. Regardless of those questions that this show will never address, Alice wants this weapon by 10 p.m. tomorrow, so we get another ticking clock situation. It's quite a large window of operation. I mean, it appears to be morning, maybe close to noon, which means Catherine has more than 24 hours to procure this weapon for Alice. That's a lot of time for a simple item transfer. Kind of deflates the urgency that comes with a ticking clock. The other part that also deflates the ticking clock is how Alice threatens to tell Daddy Crow that Catherine is the one who convinced him that his daughter is dead. Except he knows that. He tells Kate that in the flashback in the second episode. Alice is threatening Catherine with knowledge Daddy Crow already has. She has now removed any compelling reason for Catherine to cooperate with Alice's demands. What Alice should have said is that, I can prove you forged the evidence of my death, and if you don't do what I tell you to, I will share that evidence with Daddy Crow. I mean, come on, Batwoman writers. You can copy the situation, but you clearly don't understand how the situation works. It's like tracing Van Gogh's Starry Night. Yes, all the lines are there, but you're missing the color that makes it truly a work of art. Batwoman takes Dodson to Mary's illegal clinic, where Mary fangirls over Batwoman, who has done so much this series to earn such admiration. Batwoman uses a voice modulator and asks Mary to save Dodson from the wound that Mary gave the man 2 episodes ago. She states how the wound is grossly infected, but it still looks pretty fresh to me. How many days was Dodson strung up? Because that wound looks like it was done a few hours ago. There should be some severe scabbing, some brown, yellow, and green pus all around it. It doesn't look as described in my opinion. Also, it reinforces how right I was in my episode 2 review about how Dodson is going to need to get that Batarang wound checked out because Mary didn't disinfect the object after taking it out of that other goon. Mary says she'll try to save him because she believes in do no harm. So not only is she harshly judging Batwoman, who a few seconds ago she was gushing over, now she's berating her too from a wound that she herself inflicted on Dodson in self-defense. So are the writers together in the room when they're breaking down these stories? They're supposed to be, but when you get lines like this, it appears that there's no communication in the writer's room at all. Batwoman tells Mary she'll be back for him, and Mary states that they'll be there. But doesn't Mary have school? Also, where's Sophie? Isn't she supposed to be her bodyguard? I mean, especially after what happened during the last episode with Alice breaking into their home, shouldn't Sophie still be on the job protecting Mary? We can't get an answer to that question because Kate needs to narrate about how if she's going to be a beacon of hope for the city, she needs to capture Magpie. What, seriously? That's the job of the police or Crow security. Even in many of Batman's stories, Catwoman's actions are not always his #1 priority. In fact, in Batman the Animated Series, the only reason Batman pursues her is because it's a slow night and he happens to be in the area. The rest of the episode is about the terrorist Red Claw. So instead of Batwoman hunting for Alice, like she was doing in the second episode, she's instead looking for Magpie. Luke pipes in over the Bat communicator about how Magpie is hard to track. He exposits that everyone is looking for a woman, when if they want to find Magpie, they should be looking for a bird. Except Magpie is a woman with a bird motif. She's still bound by human limitations, and unless they establish her as some sort of metahuman with flying ability, their line of thought for finding her is utter garbage. But far be it for the writers of this show to write some actual detective work. Instead, Batwoman is going to rely on eagle cams, which we surmise are watching the skies instead of the streets, and from there, they'll be able to find Magpie. While Magpie approaches her next target, Batwoman cuts her escape line with a Batarang. The two fight, and we get the default Arrowverse fight choreography. Attack left, crouch, and move right. Attack left again, block, kick, dodge, and repeat. To spice it up, they have Magpie execute some energy-wasting backflips. Batwoman grabs one of Magpie's bombs, Magpie dodges a Batarang and gets away, and the Batarang returns only for Batwoman to miss catching it and destroying a priceless vase. They follow it up with a shot of awkward embarrassment from Batwoman. Comedy! Vesper Fairchild comments about Batwoman's blunder with the Batarang until we get to the Batcave where Kate blames the Batarang for not functioning properly. Luke comes up with logical reasons. Miscalculation, a wrong angle, but Kate states that the Batarang is broken because if it worked, she would have caught it. Luke goes on about how that's not the case, and Kate responds with him bat-splaining. Well, guess what, Kate? You've never done this before. Luke knows more about Batman than you do. In episode 2, you didn't even know what any of those gadgets were, so don't pull that bat-splaining crap here. Also, it's a Batarang. It's a solid-state weapon designed to return when thrown. It doesn't have micro-engines or motors inside to direct it. The whole gimmick is that it is a boomerang in the shape of a bat, and how someone throws it depends on whether or not it returns. What is wrong with Batwoman, who is new to this crusade, making a mistake? Learning curves are entertaining, especially when the person learning is admitting that they need to do better, not behaving like a stubborn fool and avoiding responsibility. Luke is going to analyze the grenade that Kate pulled off of Magpie. Kate is curious if the grenade is a fragment grenade or a concussion grenade, finally getting some insight into her training, but she's not going to stay and help Luke. Nope, she's going on a lunch date with Regan. But before we see that awkward experience, we have to check in with Daddy Crow, who's sitting at his desk listening to Kate's recital while Sophie, who's not protecting Mary today, comes in with some details about the bomb on the bridge from episode 2. She figured the boss would want to see it before anyone else. Is he not the head of the security firm? Should he not be seeing all vital reports before anyone else anyways? Like, is there someone that Daddy Crow reports to that hasn't been introduced yet? Seems like a superfluous line here. It turns out that the explosive used has an advanced form of detection technology from Daddy Crow's wife's company that is not yet released. Released to what? The public? The military? Context writers, context. Regardless, Sophie has uncovered information that implicates Daddy Crow's wife with the bomb on the bridge. That's all fine and dandy, but I'm still wondering what he's going to do about those two cops shooting at the submerged van. On the date, Regan relishes Kate's past living and training in northern Canada by sighting polar bears and the aurora borealis. Kate doesn't want to talk about why she returned to Gotham, aside from better weather, easier access to food and shelter, and having a larger dating pool. But that doesn't stop Regan from knowing Kate only returned because of a girl. We get a recap of Kate and Sophie's non-relationship until Regan changes the subject about living in a building that was purchased by a new landlord that threw everyone out, Regan and her mother included. Before they can get to the restaurant, Kate gets another text from Luke wanting her to return to the cave. Why? Why bother? Why not just text her the details since you're being so careful using the red bat emoji in your communications? Regan asks Kate what it is she does again, and the rest of us, for the first time in this entire series, are leaning forward to the screen waiting to see what answer Kate gives us. And what does she tell Regan? Nothing. That's right. She's just keeping tabs on her cousin's building, which is what Luke is doing. So why is she forcing herself into another person's job? Kate has to go, but sets a date tonight at the Antiquities Museum where she promises not to leave. So clearly something is going to happen where she has to leave. While Luke is examining the Magpie grenade, the Batcave blasts an intruder alert. Magpie has broken into Wayne Enterprises and takes out Luke. We learn that Magpie stole Martha's necklace, which is supposed to be on display tonight at the museum. Luke tells Kate how Bruce spent years looking for the necklace and found it at an auction where he paid $1 million for it. Kate expresses how she needs to get those pearls back, then asks Luke about the bombs. Luke has discovered that Magpie 3D printed the bombs using nanothermites via ink gel. Except, gel doesn't exist for 3D printers. In fact, the closest thing for explosive ink is based off of the CL20-based explosive ink of emulsion binder system for direct ink writing. It is currently experimental, but the data that is released publicly about it states that it is a very low-yield explosive of about 0.3 cubic millimeters per 1 millimeter width of compound within a grooved surface. However, while the explosive ink concept is neat, why ink? I mean, if it were me and I was using ink, I'd be using it on letters, newspapers, postcards, invitations, things people would not expect to have blown up in their faces. Imagine a story where a super criminal replaces all of the ink or toner at a popular newspaper. When people buy the paper and turn to a specific page, boom! The paper blows up and the reader dies. It would put the city in a panic. The newspaper in question would have to shut down until they can find, test, and remove all of the explosive ink. What would that mean for the city? It would mean that one of the forms of news for the people has been suspended. Stories aren't being told and people aren't getting another option for information. The supervillain is essentially silencing the media and press. Wouldn't that be an interesting story that fully explores a cool concept of exploding ink? I think so, but what do they do in Batwoman? They talk about nano-sized thermite charges mixed with ink used in a 3D printer. 3D printers don't use ink. They use materials like plastic, rubber, and metal. Generally, materials that can be melted and reformed one layer at a time. Some use a resin to create objects, but the more commonly known ones use solid materials like ABS, PLA, and HIPS. If they were to use nanothermites as detailed in this plot, they would explode during the printing process because a 3D printer heats up materials to a melting point so they can create models. Thermite is sensitive to heat. It will be a long time before 3D printers can create objects without melting existing materials. So because they didn't do their research, the believability of the concept vanishes like invisible ink. They didn't need to use ink. They thought they did because they heard the word printer in the office. But they could have used any explosive. In fact, it would have made more sense to 3D print a shell casing and inject a chemical explosive into the shell afterwards. So apparently this explosive ink is sold by a few companies, and the Crows monitor munitions shipments into the city. Luke suggests reaching out to Sophie for help, and Kate thinks it's bad timing. Luke, showing the first sign of reason out of this series, weighs bad timing with Bomb threatening the city to Kate, showing how immature and selfish she is when it comes to her duties as Batwoman. Kate informs Sophie that Magpie broke into Wayne Tower using exploding ink, a lie, and that she took the pearl necklace. Sophie agrees to help as she brings up how the Bat had a run-in with their suspect. Sophie completes the search and sends the information via text to Kate's phone, which is another very unsecure method of transmitting sensitive information. How is it that DHS or NSA are not swarming these characters right now? Speaking of swarming, 3 hired goons have broken into an abandoned soup kitchen where they're ambushed by Alice's white rabbits and tied to chairs. Alice monologues to the goons, which tell us that they're hired by stepmom Catherine. Alice decides to send a reminder to Catherine that she's not playing games with her and that her demands are serious by cutting off one of her goon's fingers. We don't find out what she does to the other 2, nor do we care. At the Batcave, Luke learns that the mysterious shipment is directed to a P.O. box, which is supposed to create anonymity of the buyer, except they find the address that is linked to the P.O. box, which is an old Gotham hotel. Kate tells Luke that the guy at the P.O. box facility gave it to her in exchange for taking a selfie. However, wouldn't it be more valuable to get a name of the person that picks up the contents of the P.O. box as well as a forwarding address? I know a lot of people with P.O. boxes, and while the P.O. box can be private to the public, typically those that run the P.O. boxes need to verify that the person who is picking up packages is actually authorized to do so. At this point, Batwoman should have Magpie's real name, or at the very least an alias, in addition to the address, and Luke should be running the alias through the Batcomputer to find out Magpie's real identity. But no, we just get the address. Batwoman finds the room Magpie is using as her base of operations, and it is freezing cold. The room is temperature sensitive, so if anyone tries to enter, their body heat could trigger the explosives inside. So how does that work with a door? Once you open it, the temperature outside will creep in. It's not like the room is also pressurized like a spaceship. As soon as Batwoman opens that door, the room should explode. Don't believe me? Try opening your front door on a windy day, or a really hot day. The wind and heat will hit you like a punch to the face. Same thing applies within a building where there are extreme temperature differences. Ignoring that plot hole for conflict, we do get a solid ticking clock scenario. Batwoman can hold her breath for 2 minutes, and any longer gets a little more risky. This means that Kate has a very short amount of time to get in, get what she needs, and escape without triggering the bomb. Aside from the logic of how to get in this room without it blowing up, the rest is a good premise for a set piece. We have a temperature control room as our location, the contents inside as the objective. The main character is restricted not only by holding her breath, but is also in a suit that's more than 50 degrees cooler than her body temperature. These are some good and strong obstacles against our hero to complete their task, and they aren't as contrived as the show has been so far. We understand the goal, the stakes, and with the 2 minutes of holding her breath, the urgency. Well done, writers. You've managed to pull off something of quality in this episode. Let's see how they play this scene out. As Batwoman searches the room, Luke informs her that he fixed the Batarang, or rather realized that it was calibrated for Bruce and readjusted the calibration for Kate. Which doesn't make sense. First, you're going to tell me that the Batarang is something more like a drone than a throwing weapon, and second, a throwing weapon that is calibrated to a person's size? What does a person's size have to do with a throwing weapon? The only thing the Batarang should be able to do is return to its point of origin. So if you throw it at your hip or chest level, it will return to your hip or chest level. That would make sense and also be the easiest and more reliable means of design. After all, Batman has had partners. Wouldn't it be more efficient to have a Batarang that anyone on his team could use as opposed to redesigning several for his partners or sidekicks? Like, how would that work for Robin the Boy Wonder? Batman has to redesign and recalibrate Batarangs every year of Robin's life between the ages of 8 and 21? No, that's ridiculous. He'd make a weapon that wouldn't need such variables to be addressed. Now, I don't recall the comics stating this level of detail regarding the Batarang before, but if they had, please let me know in the comments, as I would be interested in checking it out and seeing who wrote that issue. While Batwoman is being informed of this Batarang patch update, she clones Magpie's hard drive and finds Martha's pearls under a pile of feathers. As she retrieves the hard drive, Batwoman sneezes and makes it out of the room by the skin of her teeth. Why does she sneeze? I guess that line earlier about being allergic to feathers was true. Note to future writers and superheroes, don't let your adversaries know intimate details about your life, such as allergies. We should have had more time in the scene where we see Batwoman struggle with holding her breath past the 2-minute mark. Maybe starting to lose consciousness and stumbling. We should have seen her trying to find more information as she waits for the hard drive to be cloned, watching those seconds pass and her struggle grow. But instead we get a very rushed moment of a sneeze and a quick escape. Dodson wakes up disoriented, and Mary poses as Alice to get information about her dastardly plan while also increasing the intravenous drip. Except that's not going to really do anything. If that's supposed to be morphine or another type of pain relief drug, it's usually in a separate bag from the IV, and it looks like he's only got the one bag hooked up to him. So what she's doing is just increasing the flow of IV fluid into his bloodstream. And if she is drugging him up, well, that's more dangerous because you can die from a morphine overdose. But then again, she's only a second-year med student running an illegal clinic, so really she's just displaying her lack of medical knowledge accurately. We then cut to the museum where Batwoman is overlooking it from the rooftop, which is strange because isn't she supposed to be there on a date with Regan? Luke is in the Batcave because the two of them suspect Magpie will attack the museum. I mean, maybe? I don't know why they would think that. Every heist Magpie has done has been at night or in a location with minimal security. Why would she alter her modus operandi now? Why would she go after something with much more security and risk to her success? Maybe Magpie wrote down part of her scheme in her computer and that's why they know she'll go after the jewels? But it just feels contrived. The more interesting take would be that Magpie left a clue deliberately to put Batwoman at a different location so she could rob someone else across town. Again, the biggest failure of this show is introducing villains that are a threat to the city and the character. How much of a threat to the city is a jewel thief? Why does a jewel thief take priority over Alice? Why can't we get Alice doing something to elevate her status from annoyance to credible threat? Well, we are getting a little taste of that when Catherine, the stepmom's goons, meet her in a parking lot and tells her how he quits after losing a finger. Catherine gets a call from Alice, who antagonizes her about time running out. Regan is chilling at the bar, and Kate quickly stashes her batsuit in a mechanical room closet before meeting her date. But before Kate can enjoy the night, Sophie the ex shows up on the job in case Magpie decides to crash the event. Regan joins Kate and Sophie, creating an awkward moment where Sophie apparently shows signs of jealousy. But she's married, right? For 3 years now? And all of a sudden, when she sees Kate with Regan, she's getting all bothered, even after having told Kate multiple times to move on? Now, don't get me wrong, if the writers want to make her question her marriage in favor of being with Kate, I'm not going to object to that, but I do object to that character development not being properly defined. Is Sophie the type of person that finds the grass always greener on the other side? If that is the case, let's see a strong independent example of that. It would be a good character flaw and give credence to this potential love triangle they're trying to do. For instance, if the show established that Sophie was in line to be a very powerful and influential member of the military but was snatched away by Daddy Crow because he offered her more money and freedom, that would give us a good hint as to her character. If we see that she regrets having taken the job with the Crows and misses the military and is perhaps denied re-entry, then we can see a pattern of behavior for Sophie that would allow us to believe that even if she is happily married, she still longs for something different, or from her uninformed perspective, better. By establishing something in that nature, you can create drama between the character and what she wants. It also builds up the risk because you end up sparking conversation among the show's fans as to what Sophie should do. Those types of conflicts allow for fan engagement and word-of-mouth advertising of your story. As it stands now, we just get these moments of Sophie alluding to being interested in Kate, but without a solid motivation behind it. Is she into Kate because she's unhappy? Is she into Kate because she's curious? Or is she not really into Kate, but rather investigating if Kate is Batwoman? That's another part that could be better explored. If we got a little bit more time with Sophie and were able to grasp her motivation, then there is a lot more room for conflict and drama. It would raise an equally fascinating question aside from a love triangle, one asking if Sophie is really interested in Kate romantically or just interested in her because she thinks she's Batwoman. This should have been something set up earlier in the episode. Instead of having that line of thought explored, we return to the date, and before it can go any further, it's interrupted by Roxanne thanking Kate for lending the pearls for the exhibit. Kate thought Luke told her that they weren't going to be available, but we learned that a security guard showed up with them earlier and all is well. Roxanne gathers the patrons to celebrate powerful women throughout history by admiring their jewelry and ignoring their contributions to society entirely. They start off the event with Martha's beloved pearl necklace. Is this really the best way to honor powerful women throughout history? Wouldn't tales of their accomplishments and how they had a positive effect on people be far more inspirational rather than who or what they were wearing? It all seems very shallow, almost pandering to the wrong crowd about the contributions people can have in society. Maybe it's just me, but I think that if we're going to celebrate historical figures, we do so by going beyond their superficial fashion choices. This information causes Kate to abandon her date and contact Luke, where they both come to the conclusion that the necklace at the museum is a fake and rigged with explosive ink. So how does this work? Magpie puts the ink inside the 3D printed pearls? Or maybe it's the pearls made of 3D printable ink? I've already established how that's not practical with current and speculative 3D printing technology. It is really sad to learn how little research the writing staff does when they explore a new concept. The next part of unbelievability is that experts in jewelry that work for a museum would be fooled by 3D printed pearls. Pearls are an organic gem. They have a specific weight, texture, and shine. Any expert working for a museum would inspect all jewelry for an exhibit to confirm authenticity. Now, while you can 3D scan and extrapolate the exact size and weight of the pearls, being able to mimic the exact material of a pearl will be next to impossible unless you've got several mollusks on hand and even then you're looking at bioengineering and manipulation in order to create a convincing and potentially lethal forgery. As Kate heads into the closet to change, she informs Luke how the pearls are going to be a distraction so Magpie can have free reign over the museum. Except typically, in a bomb threat situation, the building is evacuated and locked down. All means of entry, either normal or abnormal, would be sealed off or under heavy observation, meaning if Magpie started inside, getting out would be extremely difficult. It would be counter to her objective to make her heist more difficult to execute. Well, let's see how Magpie's plan plays out. She starts by cutting the power to the building and then pulling the alarm. So much for using those pearls to create a scene. I guess Kate was wrong there. While the crows secure the area, patrons are asked to exit the building and Magpie begins to take her prizes. Batwoman arrives to stop the heist, but before either of them could fight, Magpie reveals her deterrent. She triggers the pearl necklace bomb, causing the individual beads to drop on the floor. I thought pearls on a necklace are knotted in position so they can't be unstrung. And if those are a scan and replica of the original, wouldn't they function the same way? Or did Thomas Wayne buy a really cheap and second-rate pearl necklace from Martha and she was none the wiser? Or maybe Magpie redesigned the replica to separate the pearls. I don't want to get too nitpicky. Just point out the weirdness, the laziness, and when they do happen, the positives of this show. The pearls begin to blow up with rather small and almost harmless looking explosions. Batwoman uses her suit and cape to contain the blasts that, even if she weren't there, they wouldn't reach any innocent bystanders. The explosions aren't even damaging the floors. They're not kicking up debris, they're just small bursts of fire. While the patrons escape outside, Magpie gets away, but before Batwoman can pursue, a little girl finds a loose pearl and holds it up to show her mother. Batwoman throws a batarang. It's supposed to knock the pearl out of the little girl's hand, but as you can see from this screen grab, the pearl is well on its journey away from the little girl before the batarang reaches her fingers. But just to be extra safe, Batwoman covers the little girl with her cape as the pearl explodes several meters outside of the museum, doing no harm to anyone, sort of defeating the purpose of covering up the little girl. Look at these extras. They're watching the explosion with more awe than panic. What should have happened was a larger explosion, knocking everyone down and justifying Batwoman using her cape to protect the little girl. But instead, it's just a mild pyrotechnic show. The batarang returns to Kate's hands, showing the recalibration working as it should, and then we get a moment where the little girl touches Batwoman's face. Magpie ziplines out of the museum and scales the building across the street around 6 or 7 stories above ground level, but Batwoman doesn't have time for a pursuit. Nope, she's just going to use the Bat-Grappler and yank Magpie to the ground in a very anticlimactic way, landing her in a shallow fountain. The crows surround Magpie and take her away, but not before Kate comes in to tell us who Magpie is, the photographer in Wayne Tower. Magpie gives a speech about classism, how the poor don't have the luxury to dwell over what to do and instead just do what they must to survive. This is supposed to give Kate something to think about, but before she can, she sees Regan, who wants to talk about the latest Batwoman sighting. Kate lies and says she missed it while on the phone. Regan remarks how she tried to call her, but Kate, not paying attention to her own lie, speculates that she was in a dead zone. Regan catching that contradiction makes me like her a lot more now, until she starts telling us things about Kate that we've never seen, like how she's funny and cool. Can we get some citation on that? Usually those are the parts you leave in a final cut of an episode and not the boring stuff we've seen so far. So Regan and Kate are breaking up for the good old secrets reason, the go-to for any CW show. If the person you're dating has secrets, you gotta end it. Lest we forget that anyone who we just start dating is going to have a great deal of mystery to them, and part of the fun of dating is slowly discovering more about that person. Part of that discovery is called earning their trust and respect. That's why when in fiction or in reality, when someone ends a relationship over secrets, it's a big eye roll. It is ridiculous and absurd. Now, if the secret was something that was ongoing for, say, the entirety of the relationship, then that's more believable. The secret is eroding the stability. But in these cases, the secret thing is right at the start. It's not years in, but a few months, few weeks, or in Batwoman's case, a few days. There's no value in patience anymore when it comes to relationships. You've only got love at first sight, physical intimacy on the first date, and then you're supposed to be all in on the relationship. There's no time to really fall in love anymore. It's literally wham bam, thank you ma'am. After this breakup scene, we get to the start of another one between Catherine and Daddy Crow. She tells her husband how Alice wanted one of the secret weapons her company has developed and refused to give it to her. Daddy Crow's phone rings and the stepmom begs him not to answer it as it could be Alice, and instead reveals how she couldn't bear to watch Daddy Crow and Kate not move on with their lives. She admits to bribing the DNA analyst to fake test results to convince everyone that Beth was gone. Daddy Crow doesn't take this news lightly and appropriately orders Catherine to get away from him. That's all we're going to get from this part of the story this episode, because we need to see Batwoman follow up with Mary and Dodson's condition. Mary reveals that Alice is looking for someone named Mouse, and Batwoman decides to implant a tracker in Dodson's neck in the hopes that he'll lead her to Alice. What do you want to bet that the special weapon Alice wants from Catherine is called Mouse? Possibly an acronym. Throw down in the comments what Mouse could stand for regarding a military-grade weapons acronym, and we'll see who gets the closest. While Vesper Fairchild recaps the night's events, Luke joins Kate in Bruce's office, where Kate reveals that she's starting a real estate firm to protect low-income homes from redevelopers. Luke makes a Joanna Gaines joke, which I had to Google who she was, and as a result, I'm going to guess that later on in the series, Luke is going to come out as homosexual, and that's why he and his father don't get along. Kate ends the episode with narration about how being Batwoman won't be easy, while at the same time Luke Fox is activating a new bat signal on top of police headquarters with Batwoman right in front of it and not a single cop in sight to investigate. And that's the end of episode 4 of Batwoman. This episode is right in line with what has aired so far. Kate's storyline of her becoming Batwoman is moving slower than it should, while the Alice is Beth storyline mixed with Daddy Crow and Catherine is moving faster than it should. This conflict in pacing between the two stories of the show creates a very uneven narrative. While it does finally give Kate a goal in the story, it is not something that we get to naturally. It is set up by a one-off conversation about how Regan was evicted from her home. But Regan appears to be doing well regardless of that event from her past, so where is the lasting negative effect? Where is Kate seeing the tragic results of the action Regan described? She hasn't, and more importantly, we as the audience haven't either. The writers give Kate a noble goal, one that I can get on board with, but they don't set up the challenge that she will face with that goal. We don't get anything that convinces us the need for Kate to take on this endeavor. This episode should have been about the slums of Gotham City. It should have been about how Regan lives compared to Kate, how the neighborhood is full of good and honest people who are at the mercy of crime and corruption outside of the gated communities of Gotham. This episode could have crossed that lifestyle over with Magpie being stuck in that neighborhood and trying to buy her way out through thievery. But we don't get anything with that level of insight. This show is not able to go deeper with its concepts, and when it reaches an idea worth exploring for dramatic purposes, it instead glosses over it. The writers avoid the work to show us something fun with the idea, and instead they give us empty set pieces and poor character motivation. Magpie could have been a really deep and troubled character that would be difficult to judge against if we could have seen what her day life was like, what her struggle was like, and why she felt the need to take such a risk to escape. But alas, I suspect that this show will not reach the depths that it could, and will remain a poorly executed, superficial teen drama. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.